So what's going on with modern popular music? Well, very simply, modern popular music, it began in a fairly mild way with jazz. It intensified as you went through the decades from the 50s to the 60s to the 70s to the 80s. But modern rock and pop and rap and techno and all of these genres, they have one premise in common, which is to excite the passions as much as possible. That's their goal. Music in general speaks to the passions. It speaks to the emotions. I mean, this is something you find in Plato and Aristotle. It's been known since the ancient times that music is a language of emotion, of feeling. So it always is appealing to emotions and feelings. But the point that Plato and Aristotle made is that it should do so in an orderly way. That is, good music should put order into your passions. It should, in a sense, it should direct them in harmonious ways so that your feelings become part of a virtuous character. They become the substrate of a virtuous character. But the point of modern forms of music seems to be simply to excite the raw, irascible, and concupiscible appetites.
Explain what that means to people.
I will in a sec. But to excite the appetites that have to do with anger and lust.
I see.
Essentially. So that people can be made less rational, to live by their emotions, to be more like animals, to be more animalistic, to be angry, which is what you see often with heavy metal, to feel a kind of rage or a kind of intense feeling of, well, it can be anger, it can be despair, as you get with this sort of fusion metal, this kind of slow, I forget what they call it, doom metal or something like that. But you know, it targets these irascible appetites, and then or to stimulate your passions in the direction of lust, so that at the nightclub, it's sort of like fornication in musical form, is how I would put it with some types of music. So
how so? How does it do that with lust? Because the rage thing makes sense to me. I mean, heavy metal is done in a sort of aggressive way, which is why I like listening to it when I work out.
Yes.
So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that. But the lust thing, it seems less obvious. Yeah,
I think that generically speaking, what you could say is that when music, when it acts powerfully on your sense appetite for pleasure, when it makes you want to experience sense pleasure, and the music itself is one such pleasure, and it sort of turns off the reasoning part of the soul. It tries to overcome the rational part of the soul with a sort of cloudy mist of feeling, of emotion, such that you are more prone to want to let yourself go. So it seems to me that it's not surprising that, you know, we talk about, well, for example, we talk about music, seductive music, you know, like in the movies, if a man is trying to put moves on somebody, he doesn't put on like Beethoven's Fifth Symphony or something. I mean, he puts on like the mood music to kind of soften the resistance and to break down the resistance, to make a person feel sort of gooey and sentimental and to surrender, right? But I think it also takes the form in, let's say, like a nightclub with pulsing and pumping sort of music, where it makes you live in your animal physical nature. Without, of course, canceling out reason. It can't do that metaphysically, but it can occlude or cloud over reason, the way that a thick layer of clouds can block the sun. So the sun is still there, but the clouds are blocking it. And I think that this nubilation, this clouding of reason, is what any form of music does that excessively stirs up the passions. And I just want to be clear about this. You know, I think some romantic period music does this too and aims to do this. So I'm not just against rock music or other forms of current popular music. I think that Wagner, for example, as much of a genius as he was, I mean, there was more musical ability in Wagner's little finger than there is in any pop musician that has lived in the past 100 years, 50 years. But so Wagner was a genius. He was a musical genius. And his operas are incredibly rich musically. But they are designed to seduce. They are a a subtle form of pseudo-mysticism that is meant to entrance and lure and propagate a sort of Germanic mythology. It's a weird combination. If you look into what Wagner is doing in his music, it's a weird combination of elements of Christianity, of Buddhism, of Nietzsche, of Germanic Aryan dominance. I mean, it's, anti-Semitism is in there. It's this very complex philosophical system that his music is designed to induce you into in a way so that your feelings resonate with it.
Yeah.
And you don't even know that you're being seduced. I've been to a bunch of Wagner operas live. I know his music very well. And honestly, I mean, a lot of 20 and 30-year-olds have this experience. If they get into classical music, they find the romantics very appealing. I guess I would say in general, when people start to listen to classical music, the first thing that is an easy listen for them is romantic music. What do I mean by that? Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, Wagner. Well, maybe Wagner's not such an easy listen. Most movie scores are written in a romantic vein in that genre. So it's kind of familiar to us. It's the form of classical music that we find easiest to relate to. Beethoven would be a kind of early romantic.
Go and download Truthfully. It's a platform bringing honest conversations and real answers to life's toughest questions. When we say romantic, what do we mean?
I'm talking about music written from circa the 1820s, 30s, all the way down to the present. I mean, there have been romantic composers writing all the way to the present.
What is the essence of romantic?
Oh, these are very nitty-gritty questions because the period right before the Romantics was the classical period. Okay. So people talk about classical music as kind of a misnomer because the word classical really should be limited to a phase from about, it didn't last terribly long, but maybe the 1760s to about the 1820s is the kind of heyday of the classical period. The three great classical composers are Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven, the Viennese trio that people always talk about. And already with Beethoven, as I said, he's beginning to shift, but Haydn and Mozart are wonderful examples. Their music is of course richly emotional, but it's characterized above all by orderliness, by a classical sense of proportion and balance and elegance and a certain simplicity of form. Everything is very logical. It's very rational. It's music of the Enlightenment period. It's Enlightenment music par excellence. It's the kind of music that the Enlightenment philosophers were drinking their tea to as they listened, to a string quartet play Haydn, And I'm not saying that as a put down, although I think that there are issues there that are interesting for another conversation about the Enlightenment aspects of classical music, that period of music. But the point is that it's music that is very much designed to stimulate the emotions in an orderly way, in a way that's gentle and moderate. It's, Mozart and Haydn are not looking to stir people up to break and burn things down.
Right. Mussorgsky would not be like that.
No.
Would he be in the Romantic period?
Yeah, he's a Romantic, absolutely. And so the music that develops in the Romantic period is characterized in reaction to classicism. And this is true of Romanticism in general, in all the arts, characterized by a reaction against orderliness, against moderation, against proportionality. You see more use of asymmetry, more use of free forms, more intensely emotional music.
Would forgive me because I know nothing about this stuff, but would sort of the Baroque style within a church, would that fit within that Romantic?
Oh, no. So Baroque is even before classical. So,
well, what am I thinking of when I go to some of these churches and they look overly kind of floral?
Yeah, that's Baroque.
That's Baroque.
Yeah,
okay.
so...
So what lined up with the Romantic period as far as architecture?
Architecture? Well, okay. Here's what I'm going to say, just to make it as confusing as possible. The arts don't always follow lockstep with each other.
Okay.
So what's happening in literature, what's happening in music, what's happening in architecture or in painting, they have some elements of analogy, but there are also great differences. And what I mean by that is that the development of music took place over a slower period than the development of architecture. So architecture went through massive stylistic changes faster than music did. And music's stylistic changes happened in an accelerating period. That is, let's put it this way, the medieval period of music, of which Gregorian chant would be the highest example, that lasted for 1,000 years of relative stasis, relatively little change. Then there was the Renaissance period that followed the medieval period, and that is a period of a couple of 100 years of quite a bit of change, where you start getting multi-part polyphonic music written by composers like Guillaume de Machaut, Josquin de Pré, eventually, Giovanni Pierluigi da Palestrina, William Byrd, Thomas Louis de Victoria, all these great Renaissance composers. That's considered the classic, the golden age of Catholic sacred music. That lasts a couple of 100 years. Then you get into the Baroque period. That's maybe circa end of the 17th century to traditionally the death of Bach, 1750. That's the Baroque period. That was maybe 100 years. I mean, again, this is all very, very
rough. Yeah.
And then you get to the classical phase, which is only about 60 years or something, maybe. And then you get to the Romantic phase. As I say, that's longer. But the point is that even the Romantic phase pretty quickly morphs into late Romanticism, which tends to be more dissonant, more chaotic. Gustav Mahler is a great example, a turn of the 20th century composer whose music is very tempestuous, very anguished, sometimes stretching tonality to the breaking point where it almost sounds like it's going to become atonal music. And then you get Arnold Schoenberg, Alban Berg, Anton Weber, and all the second Viennese school who are writing atonal music, so music that no longer has a key. I'm sure you've heard atonal music. If you've ever watched a movie like The Exorcist, that's where atonal music finally found its home, is in like horror movies, because it sounds like, it just sounds horrible. It sounds like you're about to be stabbed by an axe murderer. And so, music, I guess what I'm saying is that the phases in music accelerate as time goes on, it seems to me, in a certain way. Whereas, with periods of architecture, I mean, they lasted longer. And then in the Romantic period itself, when you have Romantic poetry and Romantic music, there was a Gothic revival, led by Pugin. And so the same people who are listening to Romantic composers are building Gothic cathedrals again. So the arts don't always work lockstep, is the only point I want to make there. But I suppose the larger lesson to take away is that I would make the argument, and I make it in my book, Good Music, Sacred Music, and Silence, in quite a bit of detail. I would make the argument that music in the Middle Ages is characterized by serenity, by orderliness, by interiority, by sacrality. It's music that stills you, that puts stillness into you.
That's a good way to put it.
It's music that actually, it does affect the emotions, because music inherently does, as I said. But it's music that calms the emotions in order to open up a space for the exercise of the higher faculties of man. So it's music that's actually sublimating the emotions in service of the intellect.
Thank you very much for watching that Pints with Aquinas clip. If you like it, do me a favor, click like and subscribe, and please offer a Hail Mary for the work of Pints with Aquinas and all the people we're trying to reach. God bless you.